This is Catherine ASMR, and today I'm going to be talking about books again. There'll be all the usual triggers, so book tapping and page turning, but the style or format of the video is going to be slightly different because instead of talking about books that I have already read or that I have just bought, this video is going to be a long record of my guilt for a mountain of books that I have started and not finished, but very much intend to finish, because the reason I stopped had absolutely nothing to do with their quality. I will read the blurb for each as well as tell you how I'm feeling about them currently, if I can remember, because some of these I put down a while ago and yet still haven't picked up. So the first one on this list is The Memory Police. This is one of 2 or 3 on this pile that I can reasonably say I'm actually currently reading, because this one I'm getting through quite quickly. I only started it a few days ago, and it's a wonderful dystopian and the perfect thing to get anyone out of a reading slump. When I was younger, I used to find that it was so easy to be absorbed in books, and then it was quite difficult for anyone to pull me out of the book, whereas these days it's the opposite way around. It's like I'm reading and I have to keep pulling my attention back to the page because my mind wanders, and I'd much rather be reading than listening to what's going on in my head, believe me. But with this, the writing is like water. It doesn't even feel like I'm reading just because the writing is so perfect. I find often when it's a translated fiction, because it's been through that extra kind of scrubbing process, like one extra layer of editing really, or a few extra layers sometimes. I feel like translated fiction just ends up being more perfect than things published in their original language, if that makes sense. So far, this is about an island where a government body, so to speak, disappears as a verb. So if they decide that ribbons are disappeared, then the concept of what a ribbon is, even if you have one right there, the concept of what to do with it, what it means to you, its significance, everything just kind of falls away from people's memory, from people's hearts, and so they get rid of the items because what's the point of keeping them? And also the memory police come and they make sure that everyone else gotten rid of them. And it's just this concept of losing everything to the point that it's like, what's left when you remove everything from a world? I'm probably about halfway through. I love it so far, and I will read you the blurb. Hat, ribbon, bird, rose. To the people on the island, a disappeared thing no longer has any meaning. It can be burned in the garden, thrown in the river, or handed over to the memory police. Soon enough, the island forgets it ever existed. When a young novelist discovers that her editor is in danger of being taken away by the memory police, she desperately wants to save him. For some reason, he doesn't forget, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for him to hide his memories. Who knows what will vanish next? And yeah, I'm a massive sucker for dystopian anyway. I find something really calming about mentally inhabiting a world that is chaotic in a completely different way to this one, and also to just life for me in general, and people's resilience towards whatever world they're in. Like, my favourite TV show is Attack on Titan, if that gives you any insight into my personality. So, the second book on this list is, this is going to seem quite macabre, but I actually have lots of non-macabre books on this list as well. This is The Shortest History of War, and this is one I can also get away with saying that I'm currently reading. And this is a really, really interesting read. It's just all about the origins of war in humankind, which, spoiler alert, has pretty much taken place in primitive forms with clans going against each other from the beginning of time. All races, all cultures, which is to be expected. Even chimpanzees have their own way of doing war, although that involves a lot more assassination than you'd expect, considering. And what I found interesting is that statistically, right now, as in being the time that this person wrote this book, who wrote it, Gwyn Dyer, they were saying how, even though with the Ukraine conflict, this is the most peaceful time in our human history, which is quite concerning. And at the point that this was written, there wasn't the Middle Eastern conflict going on, but from the way that they were writing, it seemed like even with that, it would still be the most peaceful time in our history, in terms of the last period since World War II, I guess. That's not to minimise anything that's going on now, just to be clear about that, but more just an emphasis on how violent our history as a human race has always been. I'm only a third of the way through. I read it in one sitting, that third anyway, on a train coming back. It really can be the most silly, irrelevant things that stop me from reading a book, but it's literally just, as soon as I got off the train, I didn't have the pull bringing me back to it, so I just stopped reading it. And plus, I was trying to get through another book on this list, and then I started The Memory Police because I'm reading it with a friend, and I recommended it to her as one that I had bought recently. And then she bought it and started reading it. I was like, well, I can't pass up this opportunity to form a mini 2-person book club. So, but no, it was really interesting. From where it's going, I am delighted to say that the author is taking very much a stance of, we cannot continue doing this, it will end humans if we do. Also, some of the threats that are going to happen in the near future in terms of climate change, and the fact that that is very likely to start wars over land that is habitable, which is really scary. But essentially the writer is coming to the point that war is bad for all of us, and I think he's also getting to the point of how we can prevent war from happening and continuing to be a cornerstone of our human race, which would be nice. I mean, theoretically it seems possible because we've got more countries not at war with each other now than we do at war, so surely it's possible that war can stop, at least, for a time. Yeah. Anyway, we can hope. Moving on to something slightly less macabre, and when I say slightly, I mean I don't actually think you could get lighter than this, really, and that is Persuasion by Jane Austen. And this is the final book on this list that I can in good conscience say I'm actually currently reading, and even then it's a bit of a stretch because I haven't picked this up in a few weeks. I'm actually a decent way through it. I'm over halfway through. It looks like a tiny book, but it's actually not that tiny when you look at how the writing is. There's no paragraphs there. The prose is dense but in a beautiful way. I feel like no one can write prose like that nowadays, because if people try to be convoluted like the authors of the past, like, they just don't have the skills to do it without sounding overwritey, as I would describe it. Because most of the advice I give to people writing is you can say this in fewer words, just because they've over-explained a sentence to the point that they've minimised the beauty of what they were saying, just because they wanted to point out what they meant by saying, for example, the sky was ruby red, reflecting the bloodshed of the past. And it's like, you can just, that is implied by the fact that the sky is ruby red. And I just can't quite pinpoint why Victorian classic authors were just so good at writing an obscenely long sentence and making it read really well. I will never be able to do that. I mean, I should never say never, but I will never be able to write like that. But this is a beautiful story, and I will say that for anyone who is frustrated by characters who won't say what they're feeling, even though you as the reader are pretty damn sure that they love each other and they should just say something rather than torturing each other like crazy, at least this is what I think is happening. I could be wrong, but I think I must be right. But I'm not going to tell you who, in case you haven't read this and you don't want to be spoiled, or in case I'm wrong for liability reasons. So, what does persuasion mean? A firm belief or the action of persuading someone to think something else. Anne Elliot is one of Austen's quietest heroines, but also one of the strongest and most open to change. She lives at the time of the Napoleonic Wars, a time of accident, adventure, and the making of new fortunes and alliances. And then I won't read the next paragraph because it will spoil it for you, and it did spoil it for me, but I knew it was heading that way anyway, so I'm not too salty. In terms of where I'd rank it among Jane Austen's others, I'd say Pride and Prejudice is number 1, and then probably Persuasion and Sensibility at number 2, and then Emma underneath that. I wasn't a huge fan of Emma, which I know is an unpopular opinion. The next one on my list is Northern Lights. And at least one person is thinking, how on earth could you have put this down? And I agree. I think I either moved or I maybe moved abroad for a few months. I was really enjoying this at the time. I don't think I'd gotten quite far enough into it to feel that pull to continue reading. No matter how good the book is, I feel like I need to get a bit into it before it's the book drawing me back rather than me bringing myself to the book, if that makes sense. If you've watched any of my other talking about books videos, then you'll know that I am a sucker for any plot that takes place in some sort of educational or training institution. It's such an overdone trope, but I love it and will never stop loving it. And I especially love when there's a fantasy that feels like it could exist in my world, our world, as we know it. And this is one of those where it's not like a completely new fantasy world, it's just like a wonky mirror of our own world, but with magic. Okay, I'm going to butcher this last name, so please forgive me. Lyra Belacqua and her animal demon live half wild and carefree among the scholars of Jordan College, Oxford. Her destiny will take take her to the frozen lands of the Arctic, where witch clans reign and ice bears fight, and the extraordinary journey that awaits her will have immeasurable consequences far beyond her own world. A random note, I don't understand why, or maybe I've just figured it out in my head actually, but I never understood why authors would set all of their novels in Oxford and not Cambridge. It's like, I've been to both, but I love Cambridge. It's such a beautiful city, and the university is also prettier in my opinion. But I think I figured it out in my head, like they're obviously both top universities, but Oxford has a humanities and English leaning, whereas Cambridge has a natural sciences leaning. So it's probably because Oxford has this kind of dark academia, like English literature vibe. That's probably why. And also, I guess, because Oxford is a bigger city. But if I was going to ever set a book in one of those two universities, 100% would be Cambridge. It's just, like, Oxford is just so touristy. I mean, Cambridge is also touristy, but it's also got a very, like, indie vibe, in the sense that there's so many cafes, shops, etc. with just so much personality. It's not really targeted at tourism as much as Oxford is. Yeah, that was a massive and unnecessary rant. So the next one on my pile is Dark Matter, and I'm essentially not currently reading this just because it's taking me so long to get through, because it seems like every few pages I then take that knowledge and then just go down a massive rabbit hole of research online. But I haven't picked this up in at least a month, so I will read it. I need to find the right mental moment, because it is, I mean, somewhat relevant to me in a way that, like, I can get very absorbed by it and not necessarily in the healthiest way. But I think I'll be okay now. To be honest, the memory police also feels kind of poignant in that way, but it's just so easy that it feels like therapy to read. I mean, so easy to read. I just love prose that feels like water and it just seeps into you and it doesn't even feel like you're reading. This is also great writing, and from a world-leading microbiome scientist and surgeon with over 2 decades of experience comes Dark Matter, a pioneering guide to hacking your microbiome for a healthier life. I do not believe that he wrote that. I really doubt that, because he seems like the kind of scientist, aka a good scientist, that would steer away from saying hacking your microbiome for a healthier life. And everything that I've read in this so far, he's doing the good scientist thing of saying, here's everything we know, it's encouraging, there's loads that we don't know, for example, what bacteria is going to be good for each individual person, for example, just because healthier people have these bacteria often, it doesn't mean that that's going to be healthy in you, etc. Like, he hedges his work a lot, because we really are at the forefront of understanding all of that, and all of these companies and all of these biohacking companies essentially just take a really preliminary study, many of which come to absolutely nothing, or, you know, the findings are explained completely by something else, and what these companies have recommended could actually have a detrimental effect. But frankly, it's just capitalism to jump on the most exciting thing and make a load of money from it. And, you know, most of the time I don't think these people are bad people. I just think that they don't know enough about what they're doing and the risks of promoting health and wellness products when they really don't have like a scientific clue. So yes, that's why I doubt that he wrote a pioneering guide to hacking your microbiome for a healthier life. I could be wrong. Maybe he did it as a clickbait thing to just then get people to read and be like, oh, maybe we should think more critically about the health products coming out. Okay, so our microbiome, the complex ecosystem of bacteria, viruses and other microbes inside us, is critically important to our health and well-being. It is given to us by our mothers at birth, adapts with us as we age, influences our mood and appetites, determines how fast we run, and even affects who we choose as a partner. In this groundbreaking book, expert on the microbiome James Kinross takes us on a guided tour of our extraordinary inner universe, showing how our relationship with microbes may hold the key to why we are increasingly succumbing to diseases such as Alzheimer's, cancer, and autoimmune conditions. He highlights the disastrous consequences of our war on germs, the effects of globalization, and our addiction to antibiotics, showing how it is only now, as we are beginning to discover the microbiome's enormous potential, that we are realizing it is in grave danger. Drawing on cutting-edge research and years of clinical experience, Kinross shows us how to protect this vital inner world before it's too late. So yes, it's a great read so far. Maybe when I actually read a greater chunk of it, I will come to the conclusion that he has indeed written that part. Yeah, it seems silly to come to a conclusion about the kind of scientist he is before I've read the whole thing. But so the next one on this list is the second in a series, and the first one was A Natural History of Dragons, and it follows the Lady Trent, and she is essentially who I imagine I would be if I existed in a dragon-filled Victorian England or Europe, where I was also born into a upper-class family. So there's quite a few conditions there for me to be able to be this woman. But essentially, she just becomes a dragon naturalist, and as someone who loves dinosaurs and only doesn't study paleontology because they're all dead, I would definitely be doing this. I can't imagine not trying to be a dragon naturalist. But then again, I don't go into the sea because of sharks, so maybe faced with a natural dragon I might have a problem. But I don't know, there's something about being on the land where I feel comfortable that I feel like I would be able to overcome that. Like, I love snakes and I love huge lizards. I know there's quite a big size difference. Yeah, I'm not sure I can read the back of this. And I think I've said essentially everything I remember about the first book. And I think I probably got only a few pages into this one. But I think I moved house when I was reading that, so it needs the right mood, moment. Although as I'm coming out of my reading slump with the Memory Police, I can just envision wanting to read all of these books right now. That one particularly appeals to me. I feel like it's the kind of book that could make me inspired at the moment. So the next book on this list is And Then There Went On by Agatha Christie, and I stopped reading this one because I got quite a bit of the way through, maybe a quarter. I haven't saved the page I'm on, that's annoying. reading this on holiday, and you guessed it, I came back from holiday and I stopped reading it. But the reason is because I was reading it aloud on holiday and kind of making it into a bit of a performance. And then I came back home and I no longer had a captive audience. And I didn't want to continue reading it in my head because I just had so much fun reading it out loud and then taking turns to read it. So I'm going to wait until I have a captive audience again and then I will finish it. 10 strangers are invited to Soldier Island, an isolated rock off the Devon coast. Cut off from the mainland with their generous host mysteriously absent, they are each accused of a terrible crime. Then one of the party dies suddenly, and they realise there may be a murderer in their midst, a murderer who might strike again and again. And all the time, copies of a macabre nursery rhyme hung in each room, a nursery rhyme with an omen of death for all 10 of them. It's really surprising that in such a short book you can kill 10 people, but she is a legend after all. Okay, just 2 more books to go. So, this one I think I held up in a video at the beginning or close to the beginning of my channel. This is Her Majesty's Royal Coven, and I definitely remember a period of time where I started a few pages and then for some reason I was gone for a bit. I can't remember why. I might have gone to visit my dad potentially. But I really enjoyed this, even though it was only the first few pages. Known as Her Majesty's Royal Coven, they protect crown and country from magical forces and otherworldly evil. But their greatest enemy will come from within. There are whisperings of a prophecy that will bring the coven to its knees, and 4 best friends are about to be caught at the centre. Life as a modern witch was never simple, but now it's about to get apocalyptic. So I love this because another trope that I really, really enjoy is the concept of chosen family, and I have quite a few people that I would consider chosen family in my life. Like, they have provided me the most emotional stability out of, both chosen and not. So I value my chosen family just as much, and the concept of a sisterhood and a fraternity, I just think it's really heartwarming to commit to the people around you and be like, I want to protect you, and you can trust me and we'll make each other's lives better. I just appreciate that a lot. So that was the final book on my list. I realised that the other book below the pile was actually The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, which, yes, I am a part of the way through, but I have technically finished reading all of the short stories that I have completed. I'm actually sad to say that those are not the only half-finished books I have, but maybe I'll put those in another video. It will be an even longer admission of guilt. And yeah, I didn't think Sherlock Holmes needed to be in this list anyway, because we're reading those together on the channel. If for anyone interested, I'm about halfway through that book, and that has all been read out loud. And of course, the Lord of the Rings series. So that is it for now. I am very tired. I am going to go straight to bed. I hope that day or evening or sleep, depending